On today's episode of You Asked, we talk about the ideal viewing distance for TVs all the time, but what about the ideal viewing height? How high is too high to mount your TV? How about that Hisense 116 UX? When is it coming and how much? Will we ever shoot our CES videos in HDR? And how does a 120 Hz TV display 30 FPS TV content without forcing soap opera effect? Welcome back, everyone. I'm Caleb Dennison, and this is You Asked, the show where I answer questions you asked in hopes that I can help you and others with similar tech questions. If you have a question you'd like answered, please email it to youasked@digitaltrends.com, and we'll see if your question gets picked to be answered on the show. Now, I am still catching up on sleep from CES, but we are back here in Portland, and I kept an eye out for questions that followed up on some of what we saw at the big show, as well as some more general questions. I did want to give you a heads up, though, that I'm doing my annual Most Exciting TVs for 2025 video, and that will be coming out soon. And honestly, I think it's the best one yet. So subscribe now so you don't miss that one. Okay, let's dive in, starting with an email from Brian Rock, who writes, "There's a lot of information about optimum viewing distance from the wall-mounted TV based on screen size, but I haven't seen anything on optimum mounting height based on TV screen size. Assuming no viewing obstructions," which I'm going to assume anyway, "what dimensional guidelines do you recommend for 16:9 screens of different sizes?" You know, Brian, you're right. We talk a lot about optimum size for viewing distance, and there are easily findable calculators for that all over the place, but mounting height doesn't seem to get as much attention. Well, thanks to your question, we're going to help change that right now. There are 3 guidelines I like to keep in mind, and I think the goal is to satisfy as many of these 3 as you can, understanding everyone's situation is going to be different based on a multitude of factors. Guideline number 1 is pretty simple, and this works great if you don't have to worry about any obstructions in front of the screen. The closer to eye level you can get the center of the TV screen, the better. The principle behind this is also really simple. With the center of the screen at eye level, your eyes have less looking up or down to do to take in the whole picture. Unfortunately, placing a TV at eye level is extremely unrealistic for many of us. Lots of us do have entertainment stands of some sort sitting in front of where we place our screens. I mean, I do. Look, eye level for me on the couch in this studio is somewhere between 38 inches if I'm lounging back and about 42 inches if I'm sitting bolt upright, which I do surprisingly often, believe it or not. This 65-inch LG G4 OLED is 32 inches tall, meaning the midpoint is at 16 inches. Now, if I place the midpoint of this TV at 38 inches above the floor, that means the bottom of this TV will be just 22 inches off the floor. That's less than 2 feet. And my BDI stand, which admittedly is pretty tall, like taller than most, stands 29 inches off the ground, meaning I'd cover up about 20% of my screen if I put it on the wall at eye level and it was behind this BDI. Now, as I have it set up here on the BDI stand, the center of the G4 is about 49 inches off the ground. That's 7 inches higher than my highest eye level. And I'm telling you, it's a very comfortable watch for me. Of course, the bigger the screen gets, the higher the midpoint is going to have to be. But that all leads me to the second guideline. Ideally, the TV should be mounted so the vertical viewing angle to the center of the TV is no more than 15 degrees up or down. Now, it's pretty uncommon for the center of your display to be more than 15 degrees down from your eye height when you're seated. So this guideline is really meant to keep the center of the screen from getting too high, which is often what happens if you mount it above a fireplace. And before you start roasting me in the comments, I understand. In a lot of US living rooms, the only place you can really put a TV is above that fireplace. Anyway, perhaps the easiest way to figure out the optimal screen height for you is to take your viewing distance from your eyeballs to the surface of the TV, Let's say that was 10 feet or 120 inches, and divide by 2.5. That would give you 48 inches. So start there at 48 inches for the center of the screen, and then move the center of the screen up from there until you can see the entire screen. That, again, is presuming that there's going to be something sitting in front of it. If there's not, then you could go for eye level, unless the TV was so big that it would hit the floor. Now, 48 inches to the center of the TV as a mounting height works great for this 65-inch TV here, but if I had an 85-inch TV, well, that would be the ideal height, I suppose, but again, my BDI stand would block the bottom of the TV. So I would move it up from there just enough to see the whole screen and then stop. By the way, the vertical measurement of an 85-inch screen in a 16:9 aspect ratio is 42 inches, making the midpoint 21 inches. So to clear my BDI, I'd have the center of a wall-mounted 85-inch TV at about 71 inches. That is well above the 48-inch recommendation as viewed from 10 feet. But it's still totally manageable and well within that 15-degree tolerance that I told you about earlier. By the way, we'll link to a calculator down below that will help you understand what the midpoint of a TV, given its diagonal measurement, would actually be. Now, I know the question on a lot of folks' minds might be, should I get a smaller TV if I can't get the center point really close to the ideal height? And my answer is no. It's fine if it's a little high. Just try to avoid exceeding 15 degrees so you don't end up straining your neck. And that neck strain is very real. Anybody who sat in the front row at a movie theater knows what I'm talking about. Imagine doing that every single day. It's just no good. Steven in Atlanta writes, Hisense wowed us at CES with their 116-inch UX Trichroma Mini LED and the first to consumer 136-inch micro LED TVs. Thank you, Steven. You basically just did my job there for me. I'm wondering, with this RGB technology, how accurate out of the box do you think these TVs will be? Do you think any calibration would be required with this new technology? Also, I just saw a reviewer on YouTube say that the release dates for these two begin in March, with the 116-inch at a price of $30,000. He also mentioned that the U6, U7, and U8 will have new models announced soon, with a 120-inch coming this summer. Have you heard any of this information? I'm extremely anxious to hear more about these models and prices. So when I was at the Hisense booth at CES, I pressed Hisense on the release time frame for the 116UX, and they were optimistic for summer release. And that tracks because the highest end TVs usually come later in the year, especially from TCL and Hisense. Hisense released the 110UX in September of 2024, and TCL released the QM891G 115-inch in around July, I believe it was. At least that's when I got it for review. So I'd say the timeline from your source is pretty off. And as for the price, I wouldn't say that $30,000 is out of the realm of possibility, but I've seen TV pricing getting settled on just days before release, adjusting down by as much as $5,000 just 2 days before it officially launched. So anyone who claims to know that the TV will cost any specific amount is likely, well, not accurate. I mean, it might come from a reliable source, but these things are just too likely to be changed. So I'm gonna put it that way. But also, the timeline seems way off as well, so I don't buy any of that information. We'll know when we know, and I think we'll know much closer to launch. But yes, I do think we will be hearing about the U6, U7, and U8 TVs in March, maybe even a U9. And actually, I plan to be in the New York area for like most of March, actually. Enough that I'm considering just getting an Airbnb there instead of hopping around to different hotels. I mean, I'm like serious about that. I think I'm just gonna live in New York for March. So expect a whole lot more information around that time frame, including the pricing and availability of some as yet unannounced TVs. Now, as for out-of-box accuracy from the 116-inch UX, I bet that they're gonna be about as accurate as Hisense can get them. I mean, they're super premium TVs, so they're gonna target high accuracy in the most accurate mode. So your movie mode or your filmmaker mode or your Dolby Vision dark mode. But you know what? The more I ponder this RGB mini LED backlighting, and I have been pondering it a lot, the more I'm starting to think that real world color performance when playing content might deviate drastically from the color slides that you get from a pattern generator, simply by nature of how the backlight jives with the color filter and the fact that color distortion seems kind of inevitable. But honestly, that's a different video. Patrick writes, I watched so much CES 2025 coverage this year, and I wish I could see the color and dynamics of the incredible displays on show there. I was wondering if you ever considered filming event or review videos in HDR. Yeah, Patrick, actually, we have definitely considered it, but right now it is totally unrealistic to do so, at least for these big events like CES. Now, you may have noticed that we produced an unboxing or maybe two and a review in HDR later in 2024. And that was us dipping our toes in to see how we could do it without adding a ton of time to the grading and editing process. I mean, that's really on Zeke and Chris here. Now, I think, I'm speaking for Zeke and Chris here, but I think you'll be seeing more HDR content from us in 2025. But events like CES, we are far away from that, I think. Unless we can come up with a lightning fast cloud-based upload and download solution and outfit ourselves with screaming fast laptops. Recording in HDR requires us to apply less compression to our video files, which makes those video files exponentially larger, which makes uploading them and downloading them, or even just transferring them to laptops, a super time-consuming chore that we just can't afford when we're running and gunning at CES. Also, like, Wi-Fi at CES sucks. This is why you see so many big media outlets not even publishing in 4K from CES. A lot of videos went out in 1080p. Anyway, as soon as we can solve the file size, transfer speed, and workload issues, I know that we'd love to do HDR, but I feel like we are a ways away from that. And even if we did record in HDR, we'd still have to stomp down on some of those ultra bright TVs in really dark spaces. Plus, you'd need a display as capable as the TV itself to be able to see what the TV was doing. But honestly, we'd probably have to do 1000 nit grades, which would stomp on the contrast that the TV was actually offering as well. We are definitely able to get you closer with HDR though, and we'd love to do it. It just needs to be feasible. Right now, it's either publish 2 videos a day in HDR or 4 to 5 videos per day in SDR. And we want to show you as much as we can from the show, so we go for the latter. Deborah writes, we have satellite TV service. We watch equal amounts of regular shows and sports. Now, I know native 120 Hz would show a clearer picture, but I'm concerned about the soap opera effect on the regular shows I watch with 120 Hz. I would probably keep the motion enhancement option off all the time, but would that help the regular shows still at 120 Hz? Can I change the 120 Hz to 60 Hz? And what TV do you recommend for my situation under $1,000? So Deborah, I could probably make an entire video about this, but I think I can best put your mind at ease right now by clarifying that soap opera effect comes from a TV making up frames that aren't there in the first place. So let's say I have a 30 frame per second signal. And yes, nerds, that's rounding up from 29.97. And let's say it's displaying on a 120 Hz TV. Without motion smoothing turned on, the TV is simply gonna repeat the frame 4 times. 4 times 30 is 120. The clarity advantage of a 120 Hz panel comes from the TV being able to pivot to the next frame faster and more smoothly than a less capable 60 Hz TV can. which is, by the way, only repeating the frame twice per second if you're getting a 30 frame per second signal. Actually, you get soap opera effect when the TV's motion smoothing feature is turned on. And at that point, it's making up new frames, like literally draws a picture in between the real frames to try to connect the two. It's completely fake content made up by basically a computer, which is why it looks so fake. It looks fake because it is fake. It has nothing to do with higher refresh rates being better or worse. It has everything to do with the fact that it's just flat out fake content. And that's why actual high frame rate content looks vastly different than low frame rate content with motion smoothing turned on. And as for the best TV under $1,000, take your pick from my list in this video discussing the best TVs under $1,000. Thanks so much for watching, everyone. Like, comment, and subscribe. Man, we have some awesome content coming up for you in 2025. You have no idea, and you're not gonna see it anywhere else, trust me. I'll see you on the next one, and until then, here's 2 other videos I think you might like.
Size matters.